Okay, so here we have some factoring by grouping problems. So when we're doing factoring by grouping, usually you just should be able to leave your terms as they are, okay? Just you see your four terms, you think factor by grouping. First step is look for a greatest common factor, all right? So you just look at all your terms and see if anybody has anything in common other than a 1. But everybody would have to have something in common, okay? So in the whole polynomial, all 4 of them before you do your split, okay? So we have no GCF, we just split it. So now we're going to do and look for the GCF for each individual group, okay? So group 1, when I look at it, I see a greatest common factor of x squared. What's that mean? That means x squared multiplies to create that x cubed plus 5x squared. So we're going to see what we multiply by. An x plus a 5, right? So remember what we're doing, x cubed over x squared. This is why your 5.6 section was very important, dividing polynomials. Dividing by a monomial, you have to make sure you remember your rules. You have to subtract the exponents. And then x squared over x squared essentially cancels or creates a 1. So then in my second group, I have a plus in my leading term. So remember, the sign of your leading term is always going to be the sign of your greatest common factor. So then I have a plus, and then my GCF for this group would be a 4. So what's that mean? It means I really just divide each term by 4 in order for me to determine what I multiply by to create that 4x plus 20. So x plus 5. Remember, our goal is that our x plus 5 match. So the goal is that our 2 sets of parentheses are the same. So since they are, I feel like I did it correct. So my x plus 5 comes out as the GCF. And then what? The 2 only terms come together. And we got it. 3 steps, right? Most of your work is scratch work. Most of your work is dealing with your terms and just figuring out your numbers. Prerequisite material, to be honest with you, right? So the new stuff is the process. The old stuff is actually what you're doing in the process. So we have 4x plus 8 plus xy plus 2y. So what do we want to do here? Split it. So when I split it, I look at my GCF for each group. So in my first group, my greatest common factor should be a 4. Remember, greatest common factor. Your mind might have told you 2, but you got to think. So then when I factor out that 4, that means I'm left with x plus 2. Okay? Then when we look at the next group, my GCF is a positive. I know that. And then it'll be a positive y. So when I factor out that y, it really just means I'm dividing by the y. So I would end up with x plus 2, which is exactly what I needed in order for my problem to be correct. So I factor the x plus 2 out as the GCF. And what happens? The 4 plus the y hook up in their own car or set of parentheses. Okay? All right. Next, we have 4x squared minus 12xy minus 7x plus 21y. So when we're looking at this problem, we want to see there's nothing in common for all 4 terms. So then we go to split it. So we split it. And make sure you remember to split it in front the sign of that third term. Remember, the sign of the term, the sign in front of the number belongs to that number, okay? So in my first group, my GCF would be a 4x. So I'm dividing out by that 4x, so I'm left with x minus 3y is what we would have, right? So 4 divides into 12, x and x cancel, the y is left there, okay? Next group, GCF is negative. Make sure you remember the sign of the leading term is the sign of the GCF. So what am I factoring out here? Well, they both share a 7. So I will get x plus 3y left, but it's a negative 7. This is an awesome mistake. So here's what happens, and we want to make sure that we pay attention to this. Remember, the sign of the GCF is negative here. So when I'm dividing, it is very important that you divide by your actual GCF so that you can make sure you don't mess up on the signs. But here's why it's even a double wonderful mistake here. Because how did I know something was wrong? Because my first set of parentheses had a -3. And when I looked at my second answer, it said plus. Something's not right. So when I look, oh, my GCF is -7. So that means this is not a +3. So X, -7 into +21 is a -3. Now my parentheses match. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. But you can pass when you can catch them. And that's why your rules are important in math. Because when you know your rules and you know what's supposed to happen, you can kind of catch when you make an error. And then you do what? Erase it and correct. Right? That's why we use pencil. You should pause it and do this last one by yourself. Okay. So we should have split it in half. Done. GCF for the first group is Q. So the 7 and the 6 only have a 1 in common. So you can write your 1 if you want. It's not a big deal. I'm just not going to write the 1 on there. Because I have a variable component, I don't need to write the 1. The 1 is understood because I have a variable component. So I divide each term by Q, and then that leaves me with 7Q minus 6P. So then when I look at my second group, yes, my GCF is negative because my leading term in that group is negative. And then what do? I divide each term by the -1. So when I do that, I get the 7Q minus 6P. Check, check. So 7Q minus 6P comes out, and Q minus 1 goes in the parentheses. So you have to write the 1 in this particular one right here because there is no variable components for it to be understood. All right, and so you have to make sure that you show it. And that's factoring by grouping. Okay, so on these two examples, what we have is when we look at this problem, it's a 4-term polynomial, so we know we're going to have to factor by grouping. But really the initial rule of factoring is always look for a greatest common factor first. So in this polynomial, we actually look at all 4 terms together and we look for the greatest common factor. And we actually have one, which is x, because everybody has an x. So we factor that x out. When we factor that x out, we would have what left? Seven x to the third plus 4x squared plus 7x plus 4. Okay? So that's what we have left when we factor out the greatest common factor. But you still have to factor by grouping. So you still have to take what's left here and finish the problem. So essentially, I would rewrite that for myself. And leave the x where it is. Just let him sit there and you deal with the 4 terms that you need so that you can factor by grouping without worrying about him. So we're going to factor by grouping, so we're going to split it. The GCF in my first group is x squared. So when I factor that out, I'm left with 7x plus 4. In my next group, my GCF is a positive 1 because 7x and 4 only share a 1. So that leaves me with 7x plus 4. So my parentheses match. And then I group together x squared plus 1. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in my GCF from the other side for my final answer. Okay? So you should always look at all 4 terms to determine whether or not there's a GCF present. So you do the next one by yourself. Pause the video. Okay, so when we look at this problem, everybody has a 2 in common. So when you factor the 2 out, you have the 2x plus 10 plus xy plus 5y left. So then you split your problem in half because you're doing factoring by grouping. So we're doing greatest common factor for each group. So we have a 2 that factors out, leaves x plus 5. Then we have a y that factors out, that leaves x plus 5. So then when you write x plus 5 times 2 plus y, then we go and we bring down our GCF from the original problem where we took the GCF out. Okay, so if you didn't get it right, you need to just make sure you check to see why you didn't get it right. Look to see what you did on your work. Make sure you're dividing by the GCF correctly and watch your signs. And that's factoring out greatest common factor and then factoring by grouping.